Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
Welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. It is season 2 of Forged in the Fires podcast. This is exciting. And I wanted to start it off the right way. I wanted to start off with an individual who his backstory, just good luck if anybody could ever get up to this status. Just to kind of give you an idea of what he's done. He graduated from Yale. He graduated from Harvard. He went from Wall Street and then said, hey, let me go after my childhood dream, and became a Navy SEAL. And oh yeah, he's been on Shark Tank twice. Phil Black, thanks for joining me today.
Nice to be here, Rob. Thank you.
It's been a while since you and I have talked. You worked at J&J at that human performance coaching. That's where we met. Tell me about this new thing that you got going, Prepwell Academy.
Yeah, Prepwell Academy started a few years ago, and I sold a prior business. The first time I was on Shark Tank, I brought a deck of playing cards called Fit Deck, and I pitched the business. I did not get a deal on the show, but as is wont to happen, we got a lot of publicity. Sales went through the roof, and I think it was within 6 months or so, I sold that Fit Deck business. So I had some time in my hands, and I was trying to figure out what more to do with my life. And at the time, I had really young kids, and they were playing all kinds of sports, soccer and basketball and lacrosse. And I was standing on the sidelines of these games, hearing parents behind me complaining, getting very anxious and agitated and frustrated with the college admissions process. Why so-and-so didn't get into UCLA, and he had a 4.9 GPA, and such girl had this internship and she couldn't even get into that school. What does it take to get into competitive colleges these days? And I would hear this over and over again, and somehow I got drawn into these conversations because, as you mentioned, I went to Yale as an undergrad, I went to Harvard Business School, so I think they looked at me and said, hey, you figure this out. Either what did you do, or what does it take to get into some of these highly selective schools, or really any school these days? And I was taken aback a little bit because my kids were in 6th and 7th grade. They weren't quite in the target zone.
Yeah.
But I engaged with them talking and said, I don't really know. I'm not really up on the latest and greatest, but let me look into that. And I looked into it, and one thing led to another. I became a college admissions counselor, went back to college to get credentialed in college admissions counseling. And as I sat back trying to figure out what my next adventure would be, and maybe some of your listeners would do this also. Sometimes you sit back and you say, well, what am I good at? What is my superpower?
Yep.
What do I like to do? And then maybe I'll try to do that thing. And I sat back and I'm like, I bounced around a lot. I've been in business and education and now a firefighter and small business. But I've never really felt like I sunk my teeth into something that I did for 20 years or 25 years. So as I sat back, I wrote down some of the things I've done in my life, and I said, wait a second, the through line here is that I happen to have an ability, as eccentric as it might be, to get into very highly selective programs.
Yes.
Whether it's undergraduate or graduate school, or getting into the Johnson & Johnson program, or getting on Shark Tank twice, or becoming a Navy SEAL, or exiting from a small business. Those are highly, highly difficult things to do, and small numbers of people, small percentages of people pull that off. So what is it about me or my attitude that has allowed me to do that 4, 5, 6 times almost serially? And by the way, Rob, I am not the smartest guy in the room.
Oh, please.
No.
Well, in this room you are.
Yeah, I guess I'm in a closet, so I guess that holds with my room too. But I mean, honestly, I am not. I don't consider myself the. I mean, I was an athlete, which helped me get into college, and I mean, I work hard and I prepare, and that leads me to the point I'm getting to is I somehow understand what it takes to prepare for these wildly competitive, selective programs in various different industries. And I said, well, maybe I can help other people going through as high school students, because it seems like there's a lot of angst associated with this.
Definitely.
Maybe I can put down the lessons that I've learned and the principles and put a blueprint together that would help high school kids figure out how to take this first big leap for them, how to get into a selective organization, because that's going to help them as it helped me over and over and over again with all these different things in your life as you switch gears and changed careers. And so I ended up going back and writing this curriculum and started working with kids in a group environment at our local church and then one-on-one, and ultimately created Prep Academy, which is an online academy, online education, starting in ninth grade, teaching kids, giving them a video every week from me, giving them little tidbits and insights about how to work their way through high school, so that if they're ambitious and they really want to do well, they can position themselves to potentially get into some of these more selective schools.
That's amazing. And now, reading in a little bit more about it, like the skills, the mindset, the confidence, like all those things really were culminated in your life. So I want to go back kind of to your initial. So you went to Harvard, you went to Yale, and then you went into Wall Street. Now, Wall Street's stressful. How did that differ from kind of where you are now as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, it's tough to get the order right. The order was Yale as an undergrad, and then my first leap into the private sector was to Wall Street. And then later on, I went to business school after that. But right after undergrad, I played basketball in college. I got a job on Wall Street. I worked for Goldman Sachs, a big now public investment bank. And it was one of those typical 100-hour weeks, brutality sessions over and over again. And that was my first introduction to, quote unquote, the real world. And I was making good money, and a lot of my friends were doing the same thing. And I was eating at my desk every night and walking home to my little apartment in downtown Manhattan. And I didn't really know any better. And ultimately, after a little over 2 years, I had this moment of clarity where I said to myself, what am I doing here? Number one, I'm not a particularly big numbers guy. And usually when you go to Wall Street, you like numbers and you like spreadsheets and you like analysis. And that was not particularly my strong suit, but it was so new and so fresh and so challenging that I did okay there. And they were thinking that I was going to continue and da-da-da. And ultimately I had this little moment. I had an injury and I just was not really feeling myself. And in a low point, I asked myself, hey, if I threw all things to the wind and I could do anything that I could do anything that I wanted, be anything that I wanted to be, what would I be? And probably some of your listeners, I challenge you to do that at some point. It's a little bit scary because
it's awesome though.
Yeah, if you actually say out loud what you want to do, I think the real shiver goes up your spine when you think to yourself, well, why don't I do that?
Right.
So that night I said, well, I really, since a young age, I really have always wanted to be a Navy SEAL. But there were so many stories in my head that never allowed me to say that until I gave myself that permission that I think it was 3 a.m. And, I'm too tall. I'm 6'7", so that's not what your typical Navy SEAL is. It's actually an inch over the required limit. So there's a story behind that. I'm an Ivy League. Yeah, I'm an Ivy League graduate. I'm a poli-sci major. I didn't grow up hunting. I didn't grow up the way what you would think a typical Navy SEAL would grow up. I just coming off a bad injury. I don't have any military in my background, nobody in my family. So, who am I to say out loud that I want to be a Navy SEAL? But lo and behold, I said it out loud. I had a little spring in my step and I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this for action. And walked home and got abused by my roommates and threw things at me and told me I was crazy. And
so what was that moment that you said Navy SEAL? What was it that attracted you to that? Going from like the high stress, 100 hours a week, what attracted you to say, I want to be a SEAL?
Well, somebody had given me a magazine, I think it was called Soldier of Fortune.
Yes.
I don't know if it's still in publication.
Still in circulation.
Still in circulation. And he gave it to me. It was a basketball player friend of mine, teammate of mine. And he gave it to me with I don't know if you remember back in the day when we had books, we would cover the books to protect the outside of the books.
Yep.
And in my family, we used brown paper bags.
Yes,
I
mine
don't know if
too.
that's a thing anymore, but we would fold the brown paper bags and put them over the cover. Well, my friend who gave me the Soldier of Fortune magazine had it covered with a brown paper bag, as if like, don't show anybody this. This is crazy stuff. His brother was going through the SEAL program. I didn't really know much about the SEALs at the time, but he gave me this magazine, and I read it, and I read it, and I had it, and I almost kept it hidden because I didn't want anybody to see it, because I felt like it was this rogue unit of people who are elite and did really wild things.
Yeah.
But I always had that in the back of my mind. I'm a big water guy. I grew up near the ocean, and as an athlete, loved to push myself physically. And when the time came, I had always deep in the back of my mind saying, man, I'd love to be one of those Navy SEAL guys with, I'd serve my country. I'd have this big mission in front of me, and it would be challenging, and I'd work in a small team, just like the basketball team. But again, it never really manifested because of all these other lingering stories that would keep repressing it and pushing it back, and no, not you. And that's not something that someone like you could do, and on and on. And ultimately, it was deep-seated, and it was something that I really wanted to do. And then having been through college and gone through injuries and trying to recover from that, and then being in a real low point after being injured and sitting on my butt on Wall Street for over 2 years, I almost wanted to go the opposite extreme to prove to myself that this is not the way I want to live my life. Maybe I could consider this Navy SEAL thing, because it had all those elements of service and dedication and camaraderie. A lot of the things, I was in a fraternity, so it had a lot of the things that I loved, small unit leadership tactics and all that type of thing. And I thought it would put an exclamation point on the disappointment and the insecurity that I was having, given my physical lot in life at the time, which was injured and out of shape, being on Wall Street for 2 years, and I was having a crisis of confidence, and decided that was going to be the thing that was going to pull me out of it.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that story about the 6'7", but it's, I always find it interesting, like going into the military, because I went in when I was older. So obviously you went in when you were older. What was that mindset that you had to flip into to be able to go in when you had already experienced what life was actually like? And now you're going into some place where it's completely restricted, and then you go into buds and go into Navy SEAL training. How did you switch your mindset from the comfort of being able to afford things and being able to go to the restaurant to now you're in the water,
All right,
flutter kicking and just hating life?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. What I was missing was the complete naivete of a youngster going in there with blinders on and just doing what you're told. So I didn't have that, unfortunately. But on the other hand, I did have the maturity and life experience to understand that part of the training was a game, a mental game, to try to convince you to quit, to try to have you succumb to the self-doubt and to the fear and to all the devil on one shoulder. The whole 6-month process of what we call BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL School, the whole point of all that stuff that you see on TV with the boats and the logs and the flutter kicks and the cold water, that was all to try to get you to give in to that voice saying, what are you doing? Go back to Goldman Sachs and make a lot of money. And had I been there, I would have been an early person and then Goldman went public. So, I didn't know all that back then, of course, but I did have the maturity to understand what it was going to be like. And I had, of course, because preparation is one of my things. My new company, Prepwell Academy, is all about preparing well to go into this field, preparing well for this test, preparing well for this change of career, whatever it might be. So I happen to prepare very well. I used to take cold showers. I used to go in the water and roll in the sand and run on the beach. And I had people would call the cops because I had DBU camouflage pants on and sand. And they say, there's a strange man rolling in sand and running on the beach. We're scared for our lives. And so I had all kinds of funny things like that. But I really tried to steel myself against what I knew I was coming up against. And at that point, there was a little bit more in the news about the SEALs. And I met a lot of people and asked a lot of people, hey, what's this going to take to get through training? And prepared mentally and physically. Plus I was 25 at the time. So I had a little bit more maturity and with all those things, and then the last thing, which I found out really only after a lot of reflection later on, was that if you're a good leader, you don't focus on your own problems.
Huh.
So when I'm going through training and I'm in charge of my boat crew, so the boats that you see, if some of your listeners ever watch Discovery Channel, you run around with these big rubber boats on your head, and the boats are divided up by height, and there's 6 people per boat.
Poor crew that you had to be with.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was my problem because I was the tallest one, so a lot of the weight of the boat landed on my head because, everybody's head was lower than mine.
Oh.
At any rate, I was in charge of my boat crew. I was an officer as opposed to enlisted, so I was quote unquote in charge of my boat crew of 5 or 6 other enlisted Navy people, all going together through this process. So my ultimate goal was to look after my boat crew. And by doing that, not only did I not have time to worry about myself because everybody's getting injured and, talking to me about quitting and all this other stuff, I just didn't have time to show them that I was hurting or questioning myself, or I was more concerned about, hey, I have to show these guys that we can all do this. We can push through this. Don't quit. That's you're not really injured. That's just a little, that's just a little setback. You'll be back in it. So I think a lot of that helped me not be in my own head and have a little pity party for myself and consider quitting or stopping. Or I mean, Rob, I never once, even for a millisecond, thought that I would quit.
Wow.
And I've heard other people. That's not to say that that's this magical thing, but there are other people who were in my boat crew who on a daily basis would be hemming and hawing and wondering if they're going to leave or not leave. Are they going to be there the next day? So I think one of the benefits of being a leader who cares and who wants to sacrifice for the team is that the pain and suffering feels a little bit less extreme.
How did in those moments when you had other people wanting to quit, when you had people, that you in essence became close with, left, and you just knew that these were pecking orders, that there was a percentage of people that were leaving. How did you handle that emotionally? Because like you said, you're having to deal with yourself, but you're also seeing these people that wanted to do this and that were right next to you, just going by the wayside, just leaving. How did you handle that emotionally, beyond just like I've got to lead and go forward?
Well, there were people who helped along the way. I'll give you an example of a story that really sticks out in my mind. Hell Week is one of the weeks in the long 6-month process. It's actually in the beginning of training. A lot of people think that Hell Week would be at the end of training as the culmination, but it's really in the beginning because the Navy doesn't want to spend a lot of time and energy and resources training you if 6 months later you're going to quit when the going really gets tough. So typically Hell Week is like the 6th week of training. It's not the 6th month of training. They want to weed people out early and then get the people that they think are strong mentally and then move on with training. So during Hell Week it's typically for 5 or 6 days, and you're up all day. You get an hour of sleep or so over the course of the week. And on Wednesday, the middle of the week, we had not been in dry clothes since Sunday when we started. And that's pretty typical. You're cold and wet all the time. You're running all the time. You're eating. You're doing obstacle courses and swimming and doing all they're basically just trying to keep you busy. So Wednesday afternoon comes and we finally get what's called a doctor's check, which means you strip down, you walk inside, there's a big procession of people waiting to get in to see the doctor. The doctor looks you up and down, looks at injuries, looks at things that are going on, and assuming that you're still mobile, and of course you don't want to quit, the doctor pretty much gives you the blessing, and then you move out. And when you're done with the doctor, you go out and you put a fresh set of clothes on. Oh. And they swab your feet with medicated Vaseline, and you put these big thick socks on, a new set of boots that were laid out there for you, new trousers, a new blouse, and I mean, you're feeling really good. You're warm. Yeah. You got the go ahead by the doctor. So, and meanwhile, as it's a relatively slow process because I think by that point there were still 40 people maybe or so, 50 people in Hell Week. So as you're cycling through, when you're done, people are taking little cat naps on the bathroom stalls because you're never allowed to lie down or sleep or take a little cat nap. So the instructor, you don't want the instructor to see you. So people are milling around, but they're feeling really good. They're feeling really warm and comfy. So lo and behold, the sun's going down. It's dusk. Everybody finishes their the doctor checkup, and you hear the sound that you never want to hear over the megaphone, which was, "Okay, guys, you know the drill. Get down to the water's edge."
Oh.
So get down to the water's edge. We pretty much know what that means.
Yep.
So we run down there and they line us up facing the ocean. And this is on the West Coast in Coronado, California. So you're looking directly west. The sun, I mean, it sounds like a movie. The sun is about halfway setting. And as we're staring out there, we know that it's going to be a long night and soon the sun's going to go down. We're locking arms and we're facing the water, parallel to the water in a big long line. And we're standing there, and all of a sudden I hear to my right there's a scuffle. And I hear, "Hey, what's going on?" And I look over there, and a guy in my boat crew, big, strong guy, Navy guy, who'd been in the Navy, enlisted guy, and been in the Navy for about 8 years. I was friends with him, and he was a very strong performer. He breaks out of the chain and runs over to quit.
Whoa.
And everyone's like, "This guy's name, I don't want to mention his name, but this guy's quitting. I can't believe it." So I run over there to try to stop him or talk him out of it. I get in trouble because you're not allowed to, as a student, you're not allowed to stop anyone. And I was delirious too. So I get in trouble. I start doing push-ups, get back over there, Black, get back in the line. So all of a sudden they're counseling him. They're talking to him up and down. I don't really think they wanted him to quit because he was a strong performer. And then all of a sudden you hear ding, ding, ding.
Oh.
The ding, ding, ding is the bell that you ring when you quit. And the bell, at this point, the bell is mounted on the back of this big truck, this big, four-wheel drive truck that follows us around. And just in case you want to quit when you're not near the base where the official bell is. So this guy quits and nobody can believe it. And then guess what happens, Rob? 15 more people quit.
What?
On the spot. And after reflection on it, I don't know if I really quite got this at the time, but basically people were saying, if Jones can't handle it, or Johnny or Billy, how can I handle this? I'm out. Right. I'm out. And it was this big surge of people quitting. And then it gets even worse. Then we all consolidate. So it's a much smaller group now. We're still staring at the water. We're prepared and we're ready to do you know what, which is step forward, step again, and get in the water. And the instructor says, right face, which for people who aren't in the military means you're turning to your right, a quarter turn, facing up the beach away from the ocean. And then they say, "All right, head out. We're going on a run." So we don't go in the water and we start going on the run.
Mind games.
So you hear the people just quit saying, No, I want back in. I thought we were going in the water. I want back in now.
No kidding.
Of course, they don't go back in.
No.
Because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the person who, when it gets really bad and they know what's coming, they're out.
Right.
So we went on our jolly way, taking a nice run up the beach. Now, eventually we got wet, probably half an hour later. But, so that's
interesting.
So that's a long way around telling you. One of the things that helped me was, let's say the guy's name's Rick.
Yeah.
When you're really cold or you're sitting in chow and you don't want to get out, say, "Hey, don't do what Rick did. Just wait another 10 seconds and things are going to get better. Things are going to change. Things are going to be different." And so that story stuck with me, and it was like something that kept us going when things were down. Don't be like Rick. He wanted back in, but he just that extra 10 seconds, he would have been running with us too, north on North Island or whatever it might be.
Wow, I think that's your next book.
Right.
Wait another 10 seconds.
Exactly.
I get the first copy.
Right.
Well, I think it's interesting because I can totally see the correlation from your experience there to prep well, because you see these kids that are going for these big colleges and they get discouraged when they get one no, or, somebody doesn't like what their story is. It's, that is that resilience. Now you brought that resilience also to, now you're a firefighter for San Diego, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you still trying to be an astronaut sometime, or?
No, I mean, the truth is, with all these wacky changes, most of the changes were based on rejiggering these value cards that I have. I have this little deck of cards. It's almost like business cards, and they have values on them: financial independence, family, honor, duty, service, all these different value terms on them. And I had been making it a practice every new year. Instead of making New Year's resolutions, I would just reshuffle the deck and I would pull out my top 5 values from 1 to 5. And it just seemed like, in my case, on average, every 3 to 4 years, my priorities changed. In the beginning, I was a money guy when I worked on Wall Street because that's what everybody was doing, and I needed to pay back my school debt and stuff. But then it changed to, well, now being a running and gunning independent guy who serves his country and does something really dramatic with his life and pulls himself and has some, basically gets some physical autonomy back and physical confidence back. That became my number one value. And I was a lone soldier on my own on a mission. Then I wound up leaving, and I say, hey, eventually I want to have a family someday. The SEALs isn't particularly conducive to family life. If I wanted to have a family, I need to make a living. So maybe I should go back to business school and beef up my resume a little bit so I can get an actual job and leave the service. So that moved me in that direction. And then leaving business school was a different set. I had gotten married and I wanted to be a family guy, so I didn't necessarily want to go back to the consulting or investment banking where I'd be gone weeks at a time and I'd be up all night. I wanted to be at home a lot, which allowed me to do firefighting because the schedules are very conducive to family living. But then it was tough to make ends meet living in San Diego. So the value of financial wherewithal moved to the top of the list. So I started a small company to beef up our earnings. So all of these things, it wasn't as random as it sounds. It sounds erratic and like I'm a crazy person, but they were all based on what I wanted out of my life and how these things would serve. And the good thing about preparing well for life is that you have the confidence to make these changes. So in the time and place that we are now, when industries are shutting down, and I recently talked to a friend who was pretty big into commercial real estate. Well, commercial real estate, as you might imagine, is no longer a thing. And he's had to reinvent himself, as have a lot of other people who are in industries that are really getting hammered and may not come back due to this COVID crisis. So it's nice to inoculate yourself from panicking when you have to do something else with your life. And if you're too one-dimensional and you haven't built this repertoire of skills, then it can be scary to move from industry A or career A to career B. If along the way, and I like to, of course, my pitch is that let's start in high school, building your interview skills, how do you brand yourself? How do you write and communicate clearly? How do you reach out and network with people? I mean, all of these things are things that you do in the context of a college application. Right. So why not start in your high school years? And, whether you get into your dream college or not is neither here nor there, but hopefully you've built up this repertoire of skills that you can then apply to whatever you want to do for the rest of your life.
That's so smart, because those are the key skills, and you hit it on the head that's how you actually continue to persist and, find that perspective that there's opportunities out there. So yeah, I love that. Now we're going to end this. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So these 3 questions are asked to every single one of the guests, and I've actually changed it for season 2. So you're the first one that gets these ones.
So if I cheated and went back to season 2, it's not going to help me. Or season 1, it's not going to help me out.
You may have one of the questions, because I always like that one. Okay. So if you had to say one of the biggest assets that one of the biggest, I guess, statements that you could tell yourself at 18, what would it be?
Hard work pays off.
I love that. That's so true.
Because even if things don't go your way, I feel like I've been fortunate. A lot of things broke my way, with hard work. But if they didn't break your way, and I'm always prepared for them not to break my way, you can always fall back on hard work no matter what. If you're a bricklayer, if you're, no matter what it is, that is always going to transcend circumstance or anything else.
I love that. So the second one kind of correlates to this first one, but for people who are going through a hard time, what are 2 things that you suggest for them to make a habit daily?
Yeah, one would definitely be what I call moving the blood. Some type of physical activity is in my opinion mandatory. That doesn't mean it has to be CrossFit or something crazy. I do a little routine every morning on one of those assault bikes because it has great upper body and lower body, and it really gets the blood flowing early. So that's an easy one. So some type of physical, I'll just call it a physical activity. It could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be going on a long gnarly run or a bike or an assault bike or go to a CrossFit studio, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be big and grandiose. It can be as simple as light stretching, whatever it might be, but something to get the body moving in the right direction. Yeah. And then the second thing would be, well, I don't want to change the question, but does it have to be the morning of? Because this is
it can be any time during the day.
Yeah, I think the other thing to do, and I harp on my own kids. I have 4 kids, and I don't know if this is a thing that you're either born with or not born with, but is to just, and I hate it really sounds simplistic, but to have a to-do list.
I love that. You're my guy.
Because, literally teenagers, I don't know if it's a maturity thing or it's people don't have pen and paper around with them anymore because everything's on their phone. But, they literally, and this is my son's because I'm home a lot, and with COVID, my kids are doing distance learning. I'll ask them, hey, what do you have going on today? And they generally know that they're pretty successful. They generally know what they're doing, but there's nothing written down, nothing gets crossed off, like they just happen to get. And again, I'm not saying that people who don't have to-do lists are bad, evil people. They're never going to make it in this world. But I think it's a nice habit to, at least when you get up in the morning, or sometimes I often do it at night, so the next morning it's already set up for me. But just to look down and say, all right, these are the core things that I have to get done today. And then if I can cheat and add one more thing onto that, of maybe a 2B, would be do the hardest thing on your list first. Don't do all the miscellaneous admin easy stuff first, and let the hard thing linger. And potentially either you're more tired by the time you get to that, or you skip it, or the day gets away from you. Do the most brutal stuff first, and the other stuff will be gravy.
I love that. I always get blamed for having too many lists, and I constantly adjust them because people are like, "What? Don't you get frustrated that you don't get things done?" I'm like, "Well, if I didn't get it done, I have to put it back in somewhere."
Right.
I love it. Those are awesome. I love those two. Now, this last one is the same as last season because I think it really is kind of a fun question. So, and you'll understand this. If you had the ability to have coffee with 3 people, they can be living or deceased, at a firehouse table. So nothing is off the table in discussion. Who would those 3 people be and why?
I call out my grandfather, because my grandfather passed away when I was in college, and I was in the middle of finals, and I didn't really have the maturity and the wherewithal that I hope that I have now. And I was so wrapped up in my own world that I don't really feel like there was a lot of closure. I didn't even go to the funeral. I think they told me really late because they knew I was in the middle of finals, and like, oh, the funeral's tomorrow. So I don't even know that I had the chance to go. But I feel like I wish I had more time with him to get the stories out of him, and just I feel like that was a big void. So that would be one.
That's a good one. None of the sharks.
No, I guess I'm in this mode of, my wife had her sister and her mom passed away.
Oh, wow.
This past year, so I think I would give one up to have my wife's mom join us at the table, so my wife would have one more shot with her.
Oh, wow.
And
I love it.
My last person, I'll take it down a notch because I'm getting emotional. How about Jocko Willink?
Oh, and that's going to be an interesting table right there.
Yeah, because he's especially if it's at a firefighter table or a firefighter table. I don't know if the listening audience knows, but Jocko is this larger than life Navy SEAL officer who was in combat, led one of the toughest battles in Ramadi back in the day when things were really hot and heavy, and he's since left the military and is a big inspiration online and on social media, and runs a leadership training company now. And he actually lives not too far from me, and I've been to a couple of his events, and I've shaken his hand, and he wouldn't know who I am for a hole in the wall, but I think it would be great because I know a lot of firefighters and a lot of athletes and stuff follow him. So I think I get a lot of credit for bringing him to the table, and he's a big storyteller too. So I think it'd be a fun.
Oh, that'd be fun. I love that. You can tell your leadership qualities is that you're thinking about other people too. So, well, Phil, where can people go to find more about Prep Well Academy?
Yeah, pretty simple. The website, prepwellacademy.com. And certainly if anybody has teenagers, even down into 8th grade, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders, I have a podcast myself where I go over a lot of these topics, and I'd love to connect with you, and feel free to shoot me an email. And if you have questions, it's what I do for most of my days, and I'd love to help some of your listeners.
Love it. You can also email Phil at phil@prepwellacademy.com. Phil, I love your story. I love you as a person. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me, Rob. I really appreciate it. Had a great time.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today on the first episode of season 2. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.